Let's go to The Great Monetary Inflation by Paul Tudor Jones. I'm going to link to this. It's a great piece. But this is a legendary investor who's talking about he's talking about Bitcoin. He's talking about why he thinks why he's putting a single digit of his portfolio, single digits. He hasn't said exactly how much, but in the billions of dollars into Bitcoin. Now he manages billions upon billions of dollars. I don't know how exactly much he manages, but my point is he's well respected in the investing community. There are things here. Bitcoin for a long time has been kind of a fringe thing. And you look at where it's at right now. We're in an economic crisis, a world crisis, and the price has gone up. Now, initially it went down. The U.S. dollar, everyone flooded to dollars, right? It's outperformed the S&P 500 this year by a long shot. Now, that doesn't mean. Now, listen, I'm not saying put all your money in Bitcoin. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying there is something here with Bitcoin, and people are starting to take notice. Institutional investors are starting to take notice. There's a company called Grayscale, which has billions under management. I think like 3 billion, something like that, 2.6. Institutional investors are starting to take notice. And let's go into this. I think there's really something here. And by the way, let's just say this: if you're going to buy some Bitcoin, don't spend any more than you're willing to lose completely. It's going to go to, I'm not saying it's going to go to zero. I'm saying just be okay with, that money being gone. That's going to help you think a little bit about it. You're not going to, put 50% of your net worth into it. Just be like, okay, boom, put a little bit in and then fall asleep. Don't even fucking think about it. It's a nice little hedge, and it's fun to own some Bitcoin. Okay, here we go. The depth and magnitude of the economic drop-off took modern monetary theory, which is what we talked about last week with that epic riffer who came on the show. That depth and magnitude of the economic drop-off took modern monetary theory, or the direct monetization of massive fiscal spending, from the theoretical to practice without any debate. It has happened globally with such speed that even a market veteran like myself was left speechless. Just since February, a global total of $3.9 trillion, 6% of GDP, has been magically created through quantitative easing. We are witnessing the great monetary inflation, he calls it GMI, an unprecedented expansion of every form of money unlike anything the developed world has ever seen. We got these estimates on M2. M2 is, I had to look this up. M2 is just, think of it as it's how much money's out there. It's the money supply. Okay, so we got these estimates on M2 from a few of the dinosaurs who still work on Wall Street. Rarely have we ever seen so many economists dismissive of an economic metric than when we asked about their notion on this record M2 growth and its meaning. The last time M2 grew at such a high pace was during World War II, when annual M2 growth peaked at almost 27%. Milton Friedman famously stated that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon that arises from a more rapid expansion in the quantity of money than in total output. And this is what George was talking about last week. He was saying that if the economy is expanding and you're issuing more money, that's okay. But if the economy is not expanding, and again, and I'm saying these things, no one fucking knows, right? These are all just theory. It's all theory, right? But if the economy is not growing and you're issuing more money, the value of the dollar is going to drop and things are going to increase in cost because there's more dollars chasing fewer goods. It's basic supply and demand. Now, what happens in the classroom doesn't always happen in the real world. What happens on the chalkboard doesn't always happen in the real world, okay? You can draw a nice little graph. This is going to happen. That's not how things work, okay? So anything, even saying this, or even anything anyone is saying that, oh, well, when this happens, this happens. Well, does it happen 100% of the time? Probably not. Unless it happened 100% of the time, you can't say that that's what's going to happen. Okay, so let's continue. And while this relationship between inflation and M2 growth in excess of real output growth has not been stable over short horizons, it seems to hold over longer horizons. There are only a few times in history when M2 growth exceeded real output growth over a 5-year span by the same or faster pace than is currently the case. The inflationary periods of the 1970s and 80s and the late 1940s. But remember, it is reasonable to expect inflation to first fall in the coming months, given the large contraction in demand relative to supply. Furthermore, the risk of a complicit, politically appointed central bank chairman cannot be easily dismissed, given that central bank independence is no longer a sacred cow. Let's talk about central bank independence. So the president appoints them, which I think is hilarious. They're supposed to be independent from the executive branch, but the president appoints them. You know what's funny about the Trump presidency? It's making you realize all these things that the executive branch is not supposed to have control over. Why the fook is the executive branch the one appointing these people? That is what are we even talking about? Now, presidents like in the past, never has anyone gone to the lengths that Trump has to just just absolutely eviscerate any semblance of separation of powers, and if I'm going to appoint someone, they're going to be independent. That's not how he's ran his office. And with him being always on the central bank historically has been, okay, it's going to do what it do because it thinks it knows better than anyone else, right? It's its job to be impartial, and you can't have the president in their ear just fucking telling them what to do, because it's possible they can do short-term things that don't help in the long term, that maybe gets the president elected, boom, pump out more money, boom, massive fiscal, buy up more assets, pump everything up, boom, the economy's doing great, boom, boom. Well, what happens in 10 years when all that music stops, right? That's why the central bank has historically been a sacred cow. Okay, one thing that piqued my interest from this list of assets, and that one day might be brought to prominence by the great monetary inflation, is Bitcoin. Truth in advertising, I'm not a hard money nor a crypto nut. I'm not a millennial investing in cryptocurrency, which is very popular in that generation, but a baby boomer who wants to capture the opportunity set while protecting my capital in ever-changing environments. At the end of the day, the best profit maximizing strategy is to own the fastest horse. Just own the best performer and not get wed to an intellectual side that might leave you weeping in the performance dust because you thought you were smarter than the market. If I am forced to forecast, my bet is it will be Bitcoin. Again, this is a major, big-time investor, okay, talking about a cryptocurrency that was developed 10 years ago in the throes of the great financial crisis by a pseudo-anonymous person or group that was released to the world and completely open source, and has taken the world by storm, and now has a market cap of $200 billion. It's absolutely insane. This is science fiction. And now, 10 years later, 11, 12 years later, we're talking about a massive institutional investor talking about addressing Bitcoin. It's absolutely insane. Now, I don't want to get up here and be talking about crypto, being like, oh, he's that cryptocurrency guy. There's a lot of snake oil out there, and I don't doubt that for a second. There's a lot of people talking about the price. There's also a lot of things besides Bitcoin and things like Ethereum that other companies are trying to release is get-rich-quick schemes, and that just don't have the principles, and they don't have the technology, and there's a lot of snake oil out there. But that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to weed through that stuff and give you the deal. Okay, let's talk more. A store of value is anything that holds its purchasing power in the future. It is completely a function of people's perception of its worth. Even tulips at one time were considered a store of value. Financial assets comprise the largest store of wealth in the world, as they generally have the added advantage of providing yield. You own a stock, it goes up, gives you dividends, which helps offset the impact of inflation. Gold has survived the test of time, although a rational person could ask why gold over any other of the 118 elements. Fiat currency, which is cash, is backed by the full faith and credit of the people of that country, although that promises high variability as history has shown. And the newest entrant is Bitcoin, which seems to have emerged from the crypto war of 2017 as the clear winner with a market cap of 10x than its closest competitor. So I would take issue with Bitcoin, and it does have 10x that of Ethereum, but they do different things. It's not all just about market cap, but it's absolutely insane what's going on here. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so let's keep going here. I also made the case for owning Bitcoin, the quintessence of scarcity premium. It is literally the only large tradable asset in the world that is a known fixed maximum supply. Okay, so what gives gold value? Well, it's certainly worth a hell of a lot more than is actually functionally useful. So gold is a useful material, right? It doesn't react to oxygen. You can use it for different things. People like it for jewelry, shit like that. But the amount people pay for it is far more than its functional use. And people pay, there's a premium on it because people view it as a store of value. And why do people view it as a store of value? Because other people view it as a store of value. It's all a shared story that we tell ourselves. So when I urge you, when you think about something like Bitcoin, be like, oh, it's fake, it's on computers, blah, blah. Okay. Well, then let's talk about what's gold. Gold is a random element it has some nice properties, but that humanity has chosen to attribute value to. So what is cash? Cash used to be tied to gold. Well, we're not on the gold standard anymore. What is it on? It's backed by the full faith and credit of that government. Well, what's to stop the government from just issuing a lot more money like they're doing now? What's to stop, fortunately in developed countries, we've sometimes seen this happen, but in developing countries, you get the wrong guy in power, he'll nuke your currency, your life saving is gone. Zilch. Boom, over. Okay, so cash doesn't exactly have or fiat currency doesn't exactly have the best track record either. So I encourage you to think about these things. What is value? Okay, perfect. And I see that Fiona is on. We've got just 3 minutes. We'll have Fiona Harvey on. I appreciate you joining Fiona. Just checking. I'll cue you in. And feel free to share your video if you're comfortable. We get you on in about 3 minutes. Very excited to riff with you. Let's talk about a couple more points here. This brilliant feature of Bitcoin was designed by the anonymous creator. Okay, so it has a fixed maximum supply. There's a maximum supply of 21 million that'll be mined by 2140. This brilliant feature of Bitcoin was designed by the anonymous creator of Bitcoin to protect its integrity by making it increasingly near and dear, a concept alien to the current thinking of central banks and governments. Interestingly, Bitcoin is the only store of value that actually trades 24/7 in the entire world. So that was the flavor behind some of the discussions that were had when scoring the suitability of each asset as a store of value. They did an exercise at his firm to attribute certain scores to different things. Gold, financial assets like equities and bonds, cash. And then what was surprising to me was not that Bitcoin came in last, but that it scored as high as it did. Bitcoin had an overall score nearly 60% of that of financial assets, but has a market cap that is 1/1200th of that. It scores 66% of gold as a store of value. Again, this is just an internal little survey. This isn't based on actual fact, right? But it's based on, some smart people riffing on it. It scores 66% of gold as a store of value, but has a market cap that is 1/60th of gold's outstanding value. Something appears wrong here. My guess it is the price of Bitcoin. I'm not an advocate of Bitcoin ownership in isolation, but do recognize its potential in a period when we have the most unorthodox economic policies in modern history. And that's what we talked about with that Warren Buffett quote. This is total uncertainty right now. We are in a brave new world, as they say, and we've riffed on this on the show. There's no such thing as normal. Every decade, there's some massive humanity-changing event, and we build it into the system. And some decades have certainly more change than others, but the only constant is change. That's the only constant. Okay, that's where we're at. And I encourage you to be weary of people offering certainty in things you cannot be certain of. We are in a very, very special time.